I was very late and ran, pushing aside a crowd of hipsters. Stupid punk festival. But then I stopped short. In the crowd, I noticed my boyfriend walking with some girl, hugging her. Hey, what does that mean? I caught up with him and grabbed his arm. Who is she? But Ron, as if nothing had happened, said that this was his new girlfriend. I was furious. What about a relationship? Ron laughed, saying I cheated on him first. I didn't know what he was talking about. Then Ron showed me a picture of me making out with a bartender in a nightclub. How is this possible? Anxious, I tried to explain that it was probably just a girl who looked very much like me. But Ron wouldn't even listen to me and just left with that girl. Absolutely knackered, I dragged myself to the cafe where Wendy, my friend, was waiting for me. We were supposed to meet before my important interview. Wendy gave me a quick wink saying, I see why you're late, but then she noticed that I was as pale as a ghost. I tried to say something, but I couldn't help it and started crying. I told my friend about Ron and the photo we broke up about. I thought Wendy would support me, but suddenly she said I didn't have to lie to her. She was at the party and saw everything with her own eyes. Wendy even talked to me. But I was so drunk, it was clear why I did not remember anything. I had never had a drink in my life. But Wendy didn't believe me, and this was my best friend. I didn't want to talk to her anymore. I looked at my watch and realized I was late for a meeting. I had an important interview scheduled for a position as a journalist for a major publishing house. My parents really wanted me to build a brilliant career. I was out of the cafe in a flash. It took a long time to wade through the crowd of screaming punks to the publishing house, so I came right up to the beginning of the meeting. And then at the entrance, some passing guy crashed into me. A red stain instantly spread across my blouse. That jerk doused me with cheap booze from his bottle. Heck! I ran as fast as I could to the nearest bathroom to wash my blouse. Fortunately, the stain was removed, but I did not have time to dry it in such a provocative way. I looked like a contestant in a wet t-shirt contest. What would they think of me? In addition, now the ugly scar on my right shoulder could be seen. I was embarrassed by it since I was a child. Sighing, I buttoned up my blouse and ran to the interview. Nothing more to lose. As soon as I entered the boss's office, he gave me a disdainful look. Of course, a see-through blouse, and I smelled of wine. Before I could say hello, the boss said sharply that I was not suitable for them, and all because of the blouse? I tried to explain, but the boss handed me a newspaper from yesterday with the headline, Punk Festival Scandal. It was me in the photo. The article said I was terribly drunk and singing obscene songs. Barely dressed until the police took me away. I shouted that it was complete nonsense. During those events, I was in the library and preparing for exams. But the boss didn't believe me. They don't want people who spoil the company's image. I took the paper with me when I left. The damned hipster girl ruined my life. I needed to find out who she was. With a newspaper in my hands, I went to the stupid festival. It was disgusting to go there, but I, as a journalist, had to get to the bottom of it. I showed a photo of the girl of bunch of punks and asked about her in bars, but everyone said the same thing. I was in the photo and I was cool. Thanks for the help. At some point, I thought, what if this was a prank from someone I knew? Photoshop? But why? Suddenly, my thoughts were interrupted by a bright flash of fire. I found myself at the fire show site, and then, in the midst of the flames, I saw her. My exact replica was juggling flaming balls. I could see a scar on her left shoulder that looked like mine. Probably she had gotten it at the fire show, but why expose such ugliness? The girl finished her performance, and I went over to her. The hipster girl was taken aback. What the hell? Are you my clone? The girl's name was Alice. She laughingly told me that she too had been pestered by rumors that she had taken off all her piercings and was holed up in a library. I tried to explain to her that my life had suffered much more, but Alice was absorbed in her own thoughts. She thought it was all very funny. Then Alice was interrupted. It was necessary to return to the performance. If anything, copy. You know where to find me. She said and ran back to the stage. I went home in a state of complete confusion. What just happened to me? At home, I told my parents about this crazy Alice and showed them the photo. She was the reason I failed the interview. But they threw the paper away without even looking at it. What if she's my clone or my sister? I did not calm down, but Dad said it was all nonsense. All he cared about was my failure in the interview. Now you have to study twice as much to get into college. He announced that I would be under house arrest until the exams. He and my mom decided that during this festival, I had nothing to do on the street at all. I had to think about my future. Okay, Dad, but I couldn't stop thinking about Alice. Who was she, and where did she come from? We needed to talk again. So I decided to run away from home and get out of the room through the window. I had never violated my parents' prohibitions before, but the truth was much more important. Alice was glad to see me. But I immediately pounced on her and asked why she wanted to ruin my life. But Alice just laughed, said that everything that was being done was for the best, and offered to take part in the fire show together. "It'll be spectacular like a fire show of twins," she exclaimed. Well, no. Why would I be waving fireballs half naked? But Alice made a condition. She would talk about herself in detail after my participation in the show. Well, I was willing to do anything to find out the truth. For the sake of complete similarity, Alice made up me as well as herself. We became completely indistinguishable from each other. We practiced a little and the show started. I didn't expect it, but it was such a delight. During the performance, I couldn't take my eyes off Alice. With the fires lit, she looked so free. So confident. No obligations, no cramming, no rules. Oh, I wish I could feel that freedom for a second. I stared at Alice, and the fire I was holding leaned out of my way. My shirt immediately caught fire. I screamed. Alice quickly jumped up to me and put out the fire. The shirt was ruined and I took it off. Then Alice noticed my scar. "We have too much in common, Copy," she joked. I looked at her and thought Alice was my complete opposite in character, but I also liked her. Amazing. And then there was the coincidence. The scars, the same appearance, like in the movies. "Melanie, go home immediately!" I heard someone call out to me. I turned around and saw my mom and dad in the crowd. Heck. I was confused, but Alice, finding out that it was my parents, grabbed my hand and we ran. As we pushed through the crowd, I could hear my parents asking me to stop. "Melanie, I'm begging you!" I looked back at the moment. Mom and Dad stopped to catch their breath. They looked exhausted. I felt sorry for them, and we approached. When my mother saw Alice and me next to her, she was stunned. She stared at her scar in amazement, trying to say something, and then fainted. But Alice was not confused and called an ambulance. Mom only woke up in the hospital, and the first thing she said was that Alice was my sister. It turned out that we were born Siamese twins, and we had fused shoulders. The separation surgery was supposed to be easy, but the doctors told my mother that my sister did not survive. But now she recognized Alice. She felt that it was her daughter. I knew I was adopted, Alice said. She told me about her mother. She worked as a nurse in a maternity hospital and was childless. Once, in anger, her mother shouted that Alice was not her daughter, and that was why she was so much trouble. And Alice ran away from home. She was always attracted to the free life of punks. It turns out that the nurse just told Alice. Oh my god, I had a sister. I couldn't believe it. Tears were streaming down my cheeks. And Alice kept laughing and hugging us, her real family. My mother's health was not in danger, and we quickly drove home, all together. Alice wanted to stay with us during the festival. My parents didn't mind at all, and neither did I. Soon, I successfully passed the exams, and my house arrest was lifted. So I was able to go to the fire show, even though I often hid it from my parents. Alice spent time with her mom and dad. She was glad that she had found her real family. We had been thinking about these changes in us for a long time, and in the end, we decided to switch places. We changed into each other's clothes and pretended that Alice was going to continue hanging out with her punks. But in fact, she stayed at home with her parents. and I want to conquer the expanses of a new, cool life. So, come to the next fire show. I'll rock. My sister and I blew out the candles on the cake together. Our parents immediately rushed to congratulate her, completely ignoring me. I was used to it, and all I wanted to do was to get out of here. This was impossible, because we were Siamese twins. I spent all of my 18 years inseparably from Lucy. I never liked it, dreamed of traveling, rock concerts, and parties. But my good sister was against it. She loved to embroider, draw, and other tedious things. Boredom. I hoped that one day we would be separated. I would leave my family. Moreover, our folks did not particularly like me because of my explosive nature, but they doted on Lucy. In general, blowing out the candles on the cake, I made a wish. I wanted us to be separated and go around the world. I was tired of being trapped with this nerd. Then Mom's phone rang. For some reason, she immediately turned pale. After finishing the conversation, she looked at us and sighed heavily. Girls, you will be separated. This can be dangerous for your health. There is a risk of developing a fatal disease. What? Did I just hear right? I jumped with delight. I would finally be free. Lucy immediately started whining that she didn't want to be separated. I was even afraid that our parents would listen to her. But instead, Dad snapped that health was not a joke. What if something happened to Lucy? They didn't say a word about me. But I was only thinking about freedom. The day of the surgery finally arrived. Lucy and I were being transported down in the hospital corridor. My palms were sweating with excitement. I couldn't believe I would wake up without my sister. Lucy, as always, was nagging. Siamese twins always needed to be close. I could even see the tears in her eyes. Stop whining. In the surgery room, we were put under anesthesia, and I passed out. I woke up in the room and Lucy was lying on the next bed. We were separated from each other. God, finally. But then I heard a soft sob. Lucy was crying into her pillow. God, what a fool. She should be happy. I was looking forward to being able to party to the fullest. I even planned to go around all the clubs in the city, find a boyfriend, and finally go around the world. But when we were discharged, Lucy immediately asked if I would go to the library with her. No, I had other plans. I wasn't going to go out with Lucy anymore. We were too different. In the evening, I put on makeup, put on a new dress, and went to the best club in town. It was the first time I'd had a good time. The evening was awesome. I enjoyed hanging out and... What? Lucy? My sister was standing off to the side and watching me. What the hell was she doing here? She also dressed up like an old woman in a long gray dress, and she was stupidly made up. At the sight of my sister, I seethed with anger. Even here, there was no peace from her. Pointedly, I turned away and ordered a few more drinks at the bar. But after half an hour, everything swam before my eyes. I didn't even remember getting home. I woke up in my own bed. My head ached horribly, and I tried to remember the night before, but in vain. Damn, I shouldn't have drunk so much. Then Lucy came timidly into the room. I shouted at her, "What do you want again?" Then I noticed that she was holding a tray of water and painkillers. I took the glass and drank greedily, and then told my sister to get out. I was tired of her. Then my phone vibrated. Who else was there? But a message from a guy popped up on the screen. He wrote that I had rocked at the club, and he couldn't forget me, and that he asked me out. That was another matter, of course. The next night, I sat in a cafe with Harry. He seemed like a nice guy, also liked to hang out and punk rock. I even thought, maybe we should start dating. But just as I was about to change the subject, a girl burst into the cafe. She had flowers in her hands and was walking quickly towards our table. I froze. Could it be Harry's girlfriend? He was so handsome. But when she opened her mouth, Lucy? My sister in her stupid makeup shouted something about love and that our breakup was a mistake. She wanted me back. What was she talking about? I told her to shut up, but Harry was already running out of the cafe. I clenched my fists and glared at Lucy. She ruined my date. Lucy explained abruptly that this guy only wanted sex, and she was trying to save me. I could no longer contain my emotions, and abruptly getting up from the table, I shouted that she had got me. After the surgery, she did not leave me alone for a minute. This was unbearable. Lucy tried to say something, but I snapped. leave me alone, and quickly left the cafe. When I got home, I immediately opened my laptop. I was so sick of Lucy that I couldn't stand her anymore. I needed to find tickets to any country and go around the world. Traveling was expensive. Where could I get the money? Before I could think about it, Lucy burst into the room. She started to say something about dinner and then stopped. She saw that I was looking for tours around the world. I shut down the site in a hurry, but Lucy understood. She immediately rushed to her parents, shouting that I was going on a trip. I tried to stop her, but the folks had already heard everything. They were furious. What kind of trip? I needed to prepare for exams. But they had money only for Lucy's studies. I clenched my fists in anger. So there was money for Lucy and not for me? But they wouldn't listen. They just told me that I was now under house arrest. I was even more angry with my sister. That evening, I decided to sort things out with her and went to Lucy's room. But my sister was in the shower. What a bad time. I decided to wait for her, and then I noticed a conversation with a girl on the laptop screen. She was confessing her love to Lucy, but my sister replied that she was not yet ready for a new relationship. My head was spinning. So my sister was a lesbian? Right there, next to the laptop, I noticed a picture of myself in a heart-shaped frame and, as if scalded, ran out of the room. All night, I thought about what I saw and remembered how Lucy followed me everywhere, put on makeup for the club, apparently to please me. She even ruined my date. And now this photo in the heart. Oh my god, did my sister fall in love with me? But we were twins. She couldn't fall in love with herself. When I woke up, I immediately went to the website. I needed to get out soon, but the question of money remained. I remembered my parents saying they were saving up for college for Lucy, and I was filled with anger. No way, half of this money was rightfully mine, and I would get it. That night, I crept quietly to my parents' office and cautiously opened the door. My heart was pounding. I tiptoed to the safe just to find a code. With trembling hands, I typed in my mom's date of birth. But the red light came on. Heck, I thought frantically about what it might be and finally decided to enter mine and Lucy's date of birth, and then the lock clicked. Got it. My mouth was dry with excitement. Opening the safe, I saw a pile of bills. I had enough for a year of travel. Out of joy, I immediately grabbed the money when suddenly the light in the office turned on. My legs gave out from fear, and I almost fell when my sister screamed. Thieves! I tried to shut her up, but our sleepy parents came running. They stared at me in shock, and then they started to tirade about how I finally got them with my behavior. No college. I would work at my dad's shoe store for the rest of my life. Not like their darling Lucy. Tears welled up in my eyes. I was sick of hearing about Lucy. I'm your daughter too. Pushing my sister with my shoulder, I ran to my room in tears. My stomach clenched with pain and resentment. I heard Lucy trying to calm our parents down, and after a while, there was a soft knock on the door. Lucy appeared in the doorway. She asked quietly if we could talk, but I just snapped. I have nothing to talk about with you, traitor. But my sister didn't leave. She dragged me to the gazebo where we used to play as children. Yeah, then we were really close. The memory warmed my chest. Lucy suddenly touched my arm and looked into my eyes. But I immediately pulled away. She was my sister. Lucy drooped and said sadly that she loved me. It was a confession. The awkwardness made me want the ground to swallow me up. I looked away and mumbled, "I'm sorry, but I'm not a lesbian like you." I thought Lucy was about to cry, but instead, my sister said in surprise that she was actually into boys too. What? Did she admit that she loved me? Lucy smiled ruefully. "I really love you very much," she faltered and added, "like a sister." I was so ashamed. Lucy said that after the surgery, she had a psychological shock, which she could not cope with. So she followed me everywhere. I was startled, and that girl you wrote to, that you weren't ready for a relationship. She hesitated. She said in a crumpled voice that Mackenzie was actually a guy. He just put a photo of the model on the profile picture. Lucy's voice broke. She said she couldn't imagine life without me. After all, I was always a part of her that was taken away without even asking. Oh my god, Lucy, what a fool I was. I hated her only because my folks loved my sister more. But it wasn't her fault. I couldn't help but hug my sister tightly. I love you too, Lucy, and I want to leave not because of you. It's just that going around the world is my dream, you know. Pulling away, she sobbed that she understood me. She would help me escape. In the morning, Lucy and I sneaked into our parents' office. I was very worried that we would be caught, and I did recognize my sister. She was so brave. We went quietly to the safe, but just as I started to type in the code, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Our parents were awake. It was over. But suddenly, Lucy hugged me and whispered, "Fulfill your dream." Before I could answer, she ran out of the office and immediately ran to distract the parents with conversations. My stomach clenched. Thank you, Lucy. I quickly took the money from the safe and ran outside. The nearest bus was half an hour away. For the first time, I didn't want to say goodbye to my sister, but we both realized that the distance between us meant nothing. After all, spiritually, we will always be together. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sandy. Have your jokes ever gone so far as to make you scared for your or someone else's life? This is my sister Barbara. We're twins. Once we traded places. We only wanted some fun, but got into a bit of a situation. When we were little kids, our parents divorced and we were split. I stayed with Dad and his new family, and she stayed with Mom and her new husband. We live at a distance, but see each other often. Once we watched a movie where two twin sisters pretended to beat each other. We thought it would be fun to do the same. We couldn't believe people would buy it. Dad and my stepmom once had a hiking vacation, and Mom and stepdad were throwing a party. Barbara had always dreamed of a mountain hike, but Mom wouldn't let her. And I've been on a few and was ready to trade places. We swapped our clothes. I gave my sis my favorite red jacket. We also swapped phones. We couldn't believe our parents would buy it, but it was worth a risk. In the worst case, our parents would be angry, nothing more. Or we thought so. Being Barbara was pretty fun. The guests asked me things, and I tried to reply as if I were her. I said I had a boyfriend who read me poetry every day. It was fun at first, but then my discomfort grew. I felt really out of place. I had to wear a pretty but uncomfortable dress. Use stupid table utensils I didn't know names for. People kept talking about stupid stuff like neighbor's new car. No one laughed at my jokes. I saw Mom was worried that the guests were judging me and finding my manners lacking. I didn't know what else to talk about. That hadn't happened to me before. Finally, I apologized, said I wasn't feeling well, and went to bed. I didn't get to sleep. Mom woke me up worried the next morning. Pale and anxious, she sat on my bed and said she had horrible news. I thought our lie was disclosed and was ready for a little scandal, but Mom said that Sandy, that is me, went missing. I was shocked. It must have been a bad joke, but Mom was serious. Have your relatives ever gone missing? Please share in the comments. I was scared. I had to tell Mom of our joke and that I was Sandy and Barbara was with Dad. Mom was horrified. She was unhappy and so worried about my sister, she almost wasn't angry at me. Mom said Barbara had gone tired and nervous quickly, had a fight with Edith, my stepmom, and decided to get back to the town. But she didn't make it home and her phone was off. I didn't get any calls from Barbara as well. I couldn't believe it. I knew she wasn't used to a lot of exercise, and Edith had a weird sense of humor. I hadn't thought it would go so far. But Mom wasn't mad at Edith or me, but at Dad. It looked like he didn't watch over one daughter and lost another. She was worried sick about Barbara. She wasn't used to the forest, could get lost, or worse. Mom and my stepdad and me went to Dad immediately. I was sifting through the possibilities of where Barbara could have gone. When we saw Dad, he was crushed. Edith looked guilty. I was feeling down for myself. If it weren't for our stupid idea, and I wouldn't let her go on a hike, this wouldn't have happened. We all wrecked our brains about what to do next. While there was a rescue operation going on, I started calling all of the friends. It turned out it wasn't for nothing. Martha, our friend, said she'd seen me in the city, and even had a few words, though I'd behaved strange. I was going to ask for details, but the police called my parents at that moment. They said a young woman's body had been found in the river, and the description matched. We panicked. Neither of my parents could drive, so we took a taxi. I prayed it wasn't Barbara. We came and saw the body on the grass. The girl wore a red jacket. My jacket. My breath caught. The most horrible few seconds of my life. I looked closer and sighed with relief. It wasn't Barbara. Some other girl in a similar jacket. We were relieved, even though we felt sorry for the girl. And then my phone rang. It was Barbara. She was crying and asking if I was okay. Turned out she saw on the news. The mass media didn't bother to change the name. I was so happy. I wasn't even angry at her. When we got home, Barbara told what had happened. She was mad at Dad and Edith and didn't want to go home to them, but also didn't want to go back to Mom and spoil my fun. So she hitched a ride back to town and wanted to stay in a hotel. She was so upset about the fight with Edith that she drank a sleeping pill and was out for a day and a night. She didn't hear the calls, and when she woke up, she saw the news. We spent this night all together. Barbara and I shared a bed, and my parents slept where they could find a place. A few times I woke up to dreams of having lost her again. Now that it's all over, we decided to see more of each other, and Barbara and I realized that we all have a place, especially us twins. Do you have siblings? Do you have a fear of losing them? Share your stories in the comments. If you want more people to see this video, please like it, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell button to know when we release our next vids. Have a great day, and may your pranks never get out of control.
The phone vibrated. It was Kaya, my sister. She was panicking, saying something about her boyfriend, a bed, some kind of basement. She begged to be saved, but then the connection was abruptly cut off. What? Again? My sister was always playing pranks, which made me mad. I always rushed to the rescue, but time after time, I only ran into my sister's pranks. I won't be fooled this time. I called her back, but she didn't pick up. I called her 100 times. What if it was serious this time? Kai was so convincing. But if it was a hoax again, I would just destroy her. I was going to look for her, but as I passed her room, I noticed an open laptop on the table. There was her conversation with Mitch on the screen. Oh no, did they get back together? He wrote that he was expecting her at his house today and sent her the address. Here you are, sister. 20 minutes later, I was at his house. I knocked and the door opened at the same moment. What if it was part of a prank after all? I told him I'd come for my sister, but Mitch hesitated and said he hadn't seen her in 2 days. It was kind of suspicious. I was worried. Noticing this, Mitch suggested that we look for her together. He called me inside and asked me to wait while he changed. Mitch lived in a cool house with a stylish renovation. There was a studio room on the first floor. I sat down on the bed and looked around. There were posters of athletes, a video game console, pictures of Mitch with some kids. Nothing special, just a strange handle sticking out of the wall. And then I noticed Kaya's bag. Well then, it was definitely a joke. Sister, you can't fool me this time. I needed to play along with Mitch. When he came back, I told him I should probably call cops in case my sister was in danger. I already got my phone out. Suddenly, Mitch asked me if my heart was telling me something. After all, we were sisters and we should have some kind of intuitive connection. Are you kidding me? But I played along and replied that I felt like she was somewhere close. Mitch smiled strangely and said I was right. He jerked a handle on the wall. The bed beneath me parted and I fell down. What was going on? I fell somewhere and hurt myself. What was this place? Then with an effort, I got up and saw Kaya. She was trembling all over. Quite natural, but it was time to end this unfortunate joke. I shook myself off and gloated that I knew that this was just another stupid prank of hers, and I was already calling the police. But where was the phone? Looks like he stayed there. Heck. Kaya started shouting that I was a stupid fool. This wasn't a prank. She and Mitch had been fighting for the past month, and all of a sudden, he'd invited her over. Kaya thought it was an olive branch, but he suddenly pushed her into the basement, and she had been sitting here for 10 hours. It seemed strange to me. But there was one thing I was sure of. Kaya always picks out some assholes. And this one infuriated me especially. Once he even tried to conduct an educational conversation so that my sister and I would be kinder to each other. Mitch really annoyed me. He was weird. Time passed, but Mitch couldn't even be heard. Kaya suddenly started crying and I felt uneasy. Hey, you're actually the eldest. Do you have any ideas on how to get out? Clear, so it was all on me again. I decided to look around. The light came from a small window near the ceiling. And I could see that there was nothing in the basement but an old table and a door. I began to study the door. There was a similar lock in my room, which Kaya always unlocked with ease. I hated it, but it might save us now. Kaya perked up a little, took out a hairpin, and inserted it into the lock, but it immediately bent. How can you be so clumsy? I tried to figure out what to do, but Kaya made it difficult to think, tapping her foot nervously, and then I had an idea. I asked Kaya to take off her shoes with a massive heel and tried to knock out the lock with them. My sister watched in silence and was not going to help. She said that she was very sick. Never mind, we'll get out and then I'll show her sick. It went on for more than an hour. I knocked as hard as I could. I couldn't do anything. I sat down against the wall and cried softly. Suddenly, Kaya jumped up and said I was right. It was all hoax. But she was tired of being stuck here, and she had had enough fun watching me to try to get out. She's a real head case. Only a psychopath could think of such a thing. Kaya screamed for Mitch to open the door. It was all over. There was silence upstairs. She started yelling at the top of her lungs and banging on the door, but Mitch still didn't come to the rescue. Suddenly, footsteps sounded from above. I already wanted to get out and stop talking to this idiot forever. And then we heard the sound of a chainsaw. Kaya was in panic, and I was annoyed by this prolonged joke. What's the use of a practical joke if you already know about it? Kaya yelled for Mitch to open up. The jokes were over. Duh, an actress. How much longer? But Kaya was sobbing in fright, repeating that it shouldn't be like this. That Mitch should have opened the door after her signal. Yeah, go on with you. Kaya became hysterical. I think I've only seen her like this once in my life, when our dad... Suddenly, smoke began to pour out from under the door. What kind of special effects are these? I shifted my gaze to Kaya and felt a growing sense of unease. Kaya took off her earring and tried to pick the lock with trembling hands. I could hear the wooden beams crackling from the fire, and I knew from the sound that the fire was reaching the basement. Burning up in a locked room was my worst nightmare. Well, even if it was a hoax, I'd rather be a naive fool again than have nothing left of us. I was even afraid to think that. I had to open the window immediately, but it was so high. Kaya offered to move the table, but it was too heavy. We tried to move it, and then Kaya started coughing heavily from the smoke. Bagel, I think I'm fading. She whispered. Bagel, that's what she called me when I was a kid. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid that she would fall, and I went to her, and Kaya hugged me. She didn't realize that Mitch was a real maniac. Kaya talked about how lonely she was after her father was hit by a car. Mom turned all her attention to me because I was the youngest, and Kaya was left alone with her pain. She always chose only strong guys, looking for support in them, and so ran into a psychopath. She also dragged me into it. Kaya coughed again. She was getting worse. I begged her to hold on just a little longer, but I knew there would be no miracle. My sister Fair quietly whispered that she loved me, and she was very sorry for what had happened. It's been so long since she said anything like that to me. Why now, when we were about to die? I replied through my tears that I loved her too. The door opened and Mitch came in, looking pleased. His smile faded when he saw Kaya lying on my lap, almost unconscious. He picked her up and carried her out of the basement. I understood nothing, but I followed him. When my sister caught her breath, Mitch said he was sorry, but now he had it all worked out. He managed to bring us together. It turned out that he was very upset by our quarrels because he was the older brother himself and knew how important peace was in the family. But after unsuccessful attempts to get through to us with conversations, he realized that he needed to act more radically, and he had a plan to intimidate us so that in an extreme situation, we would unite and make up. He thought it all out. The sound of burning wood and chainsaw was a recording, and the smoke was a smoke machine effect. Got what he wanted, my sister and I looked at each other and, without speaking, pushed him onto the bed and Kaya lowered the lever. Now we're having tea in this kitchen, and I'm so glad I finally found a friend in my sister. Mitch's screams came from the basement, but they didn't bother us at all. Let him sit there for a couple of hours. Let's think about it.
She resisted in every way, but I dragged her into the closet anyway. Now you get what you deserve. Ellie screamed and begged for help. But I was adamant. I suffered too long to just let you go now. I looked at my sister and I was literally bursting with a sense of superiority. At last, I will do everything with you that you deserve. I was sitting at the table and could barely contain my anger. My parents praised my sister Ellie again. They said she studied so well and I always got C's. God, I was so sick of this. I dreamed of teaching my sister a lesson, but it was impossible. My parents always punished me severely, even if I just looked in her direction the wrong way. They idolized her, and they didn't care about me at all. Thank God they were going on a business trip, and maybe I would finally be able to deal with this upstart. In the morning, after my parents left, I already began to think about a plan of revenge. Should I burn all her notes? This nerd wouldn't simply withstand such a loss. While I was thinking about other options, I went to my parents' office. I had long wanted to enroll in the swimming section, but I needed some kind of certificate for this. I was rummaging through Dad's desk drawer. It should be here somewhere, when suddenly something interesting caught my eye. The folder to which my sister's baby photo was attached. Anticipating something exciting, I opened it and just froze. I was just passing my eyes over the lines again and again and just couldn't believe it. It turned out that my parents adopted my sister Ellie 14 years ago, when I was just a year old. Holy shit. It took another couple of minutes until I was convinced that I was definitely not mistaken. So Ellie was some kind of foundling. I always knew she sucked. I was just elated. Finally, I would be able to let her have it, because it turned out she was not even my sister. I immediately ran to Ellie's room. She was cramming something again as usual. Hey, foundling! Get out of our house, I shouted to her. Ellie looked at me blankly. Then I told her everything. Of course, she didn't believe me. This thing generally tried to contact me as little as possible. Take my word, now I was going to go wild. I showed her the folder with the documents. Ellie studied everything for a long time. You should have seen her face. Yes, you are a real orphan. Ellie tearfully started calling her mom. I was about to take the phone away from her, but suddenly the operator announced in a mechanical voice that the number was not available now. At the same time, Ellie and I remembered that our parents had warned us that they would most likely not have a connection on a business trip. Ellie looked at me in fright and I was just triumphant. At last, I will be able to take revenge on you for everything. For the fact that you always had more toys. For the fact that even for the new year, they bought you expensive gifts and I got some bullshit. Allegedly for bad behavior. Our parents have always loved you more. But now justice will prevail. It was as if something had awakened in me. All the rage that I had to restrain while my parents were here now broke out. I literally reveled in my superiority over this beggar. Thought you were so cool? Yeah. It was only because my parents pulled you out of some garbage dump for some reason. Ellie wanted to say something, but she froze tensely. I think I looked so threatening at the moment, and she was right. I was going to teach her a lesson for everything. I just didn't know where to start. So first, you clean up the whole house. My parents told me to do it so that, God forbid, you wouldn't be distracted from your cramming. But now this won't happen anymore. You've already had too sweet a life as a foundling. Now you'll have to pay for everything. Ellie tried to object, but I immediately yelled at her, either you do it, or I'll throw you out with all your clothes on the street. And, I'm not kidding. You're already unworthy to be in this house. I'm kind now. Swallowing tears, Ellie brought a mop and detergents. And I sat on the couch with a glass of lemonade and watched her clumsily put things in order. Of course, because I usually did it alone. Sometimes Ellie tried to start a conversation but immediately hesitated. She was always afraid of me, but she didn't seem to suspect what I was really capable of. I'll show her soon. Evening came, but this klutz had not even cleaned half of the house. I was already tired of watching these inept efforts. I had to come up with something else and make her do all my homework overnight. Ellie studied a grade below me, but it's okay. She was such a nerd for a reason. She would figure it out. I was distracted by thoughts for just a couple of minutes when suddenly Ellie disappeared somewhere. She couldn't leave the house. I was at the door. She locked herself in the room. This angered me even more. Do you think we're done yet? You're only making it worse for yourself. Someday you'll have to get out of there. I brought a couple of pillows and settled down in the hallway directly opposite the exit from the room. I could wait for that. Time passed and it infuriated me more and more. I think I've turned into a solid ball of rage. Well, sister, now you'll pay for it. More and more plans of revenge appeared in my head. Sometimes they scared me. Where did it even come from in me? But then I didn't think much about it. About 1 o'clock in the morning, I heard the door of my sister's room gently open. Sweetheart, are you hungry? I watched with a grin as my sister tiptoed out. I savored the moment because I knew she couldn't get away from me anyway. When my sister was already making her way down the corridor, I suddenly jumped up. On your knees, I yelled. You've made me wait too long. Ellie was stunned. She tried to mumble something about not doing it, but I was already furious. You still dare to object to me? You're a foundling. He took my parents away from me. With that, I grabbed Ellie and dragged her into the closet. Let her sit and think about her behavior. There were knocks from the closet and requests to let her out, but I was adamant. I'd already spent too much time today trying to pacify this beggar. I calmly turned around and went to bed. Tomorrow, I would decide what to do with her. But I woke up earlier than I expected. What are those screams? I slowly went down to the closet and was confused. Ellie was sobbing in my mom's arms, and my furious dad was standing next to her. They came back earlier and released Ellie. Heck! I frantically came up with at least some excuse, but Ellie had already told them everything. There was a tense pause. Dad was breathing heavily and glaring at me. Mom looked completely lost. And Ellie was sobbing. What the hell did you do to your sister? My dad suddenly yelled. It pissed me off. She's not my sister at all, I yelled. I found her adoption papers. You've been deceiving me all this time. You loved her more, even though she's not your own, and now you're blaming me for everything. Mom and Dad looked at each other anxiously. Adoption papers. He said in a changed tone. I couldn't figure out what was going on. Dad continued. We didn't want to tell you, but actually you are both adopted. Your mother and I can't have children. Lena, your real parents abandoned you in the hospital. We took you first. It was like a bucket of ice water was poured on me. What? Aren't you my parents? So I'm a foundling too? I couldn't believe it. Is that why you've always disliked me? You just liked Ellie better of the two of us. We're not your family anyway. You just took me from the orphanage to make me a maid, right? So that I can do all the dirty work while Ellie does her great things. Enough! Dad shouted. Go to your room. You are an ungrateful egoist. I still need to think about how to punish you. It's just unthinkable to do this to your sister. But then Ellie suddenly spoke up. I thought she was just going to talk it all over again. Anger started boiling in me. But Ellie asked Dad to forgive me. She said that her parents probably really paid too much attention to her academic achievements, and they put too much pressure on me. I couldn't believe my ears. The girl I locked in the closet for the night was now protecting me? Tears streamed down my face. Ellie timidly approached me and held out her hand. "Let's live in peace?" She smiled, surprised. I just nodded. Mom said that probably they really were too obsessed with her studies and did not notice how resentment was accumulating in me. She said I would be transferred to a new school and enrolled in anger management courses. I stood in silence and only now began to realize what I had done. I wanted to apologize to Ellie. I wanted to take the time back. In an instant, my whole life changed. Now everything would be different, but I can handle it. We'll manage. I looked at Ellie and quietly asked if she would help me with my studies if I had any problems at the new school. She smiled gently and nodded. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.